And now to business stories. The governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, Dr. Olayemi Kadoso, says that the Apex Bank could be asking deposit money banks to increase their capital base in order to service the $1 trillion economy projected by President Bola Tinubu. He stated that his administration has set a goal of achieving a GDP of $1 trillion over the next 7 years. And joining me to talk about these is Chief Economist, SBN Professionals, Paul Agbaje. Good afternoon, Paul. Glad to have you join me.
Good afternoon. Thank you so very much for having me.
All right. Paul, what do you make of the economic plans by the new CBN governor?
Well, I think the request to improve or to increase the capitalization of bank is important. Beyond the need to grow our economy to $1 trillion, it's also important to know that the value or quality of money being held has currently been reduced as a result of devaluation. 2, inflation, as against what central bank was targeting at 6 to 9%, is now 27%. And that, of course, has implication with what the commercial bank has as their capitalization. So I think it's very important that the banks, as the central bank has requested, revalue what they have or increase their capitalization as they have it today. So I think it's a way to go for some of the things that the central bank has just presented. Here is it. All of those now works in tangent with the target the central bank has regarding boosting the value of the economy from about $450, $500 billion to $1 trillion. Because of course, when the capitalization of of commercial banks or deposit money banks increase, it's going to have implication on the overall size of the national economy.
But Paul, what do you think could be the likely drawbacks of this recapitalization policy? Don't you think some banks may likely go into extinction?
Well, I doubt if banks will go into extinction. There are templates that could be used within 2007 and beyond. We have now had banks who may not be able. Obviously, I really can't say what central bank will eventually settle for. But I can tell you that some banks, there will be merger, there will be acquisition of some banks. So the name may not be there. Before now, we had Diamond Bank, and nobody could imagine that Diamond Bank would disappear. It's now part of another bank. And of course, the bank, even though generally banking system have some issues in Nigeria, but you can also say that some of these banks are still really very functional. So some banks, in terms of name, you may not hear them, but that does not mean that depositors' money, which of course is the primary interest of central bank and NDIC, will still be there and will still be very functional.
Paul, how would you rate the last recapitalization? There's been concerns as the Naira has been devalued to close to 100% since 2008 when we had the last recapitalization. If you recall, as of then, the Naira was going for around 116 Naira to a dollar in January of 2008. So what would you say were the benefits of that last recapitalization?
I can say the devaluation is over 100%, it's about 1,000%. So each time we devalue, the quality in terms of global worth of our businesses, including banks, would also need to be recapitalized at a time, which is what we are experiencing now. The implication is that for us to have some investors come into our country and to believe that Nigerian bank has safe to deposit their money, or those even that have their money today, and they will not be faced with fears of a bank disappearing or closing their shops. It's important for those who are in the business to improve their share capital beyond what they have today. So like I said, time and again, economic policy is like snooker board. When the player who intends to kick or to hit a white ball in order to pot maybe a blue ball or a red ball as the case may be, if he makes mistake and pot the black ball, that is the end of the game. What we did was subsidy removal, which of course was supposed to be a fiscal rearrangement. Then we said we're going to unify exchange rate, which was supposed to be a monetary rearrangement. But look at the implication. It's having sporadic effects on poverty, sporadic effects on even market capitalization. What is all of this telling us? Even though I think from the beginning of the year, there should have been recapitalization of bank. I will wait for central bank to give finality as to what they are looking at for what bank should be, because capitalization of bank goes beyond earlier submissions. It includes, bringing relative stability to the market, and more importantly, sustainability of the banks. And I think on the final note, I would say even making money lendable in the economy to increase, because when banks have more in terms of their deposit, they also have that chance of giving more to investors or to industry or to operators or to business people in terms of lending. And this, of course, will have implication in our overall economic outlook.
Mr. Agbaje, let's talk about those that cater to certain needs of the customers. I'm looking at those in the business of medium and small banks, for instance. How do you think it may affect banks on that level?
Well, I think to a large extent, some of those banks are already being recapitalized. I know central bank may want to include them, but the recent announcement will affect the deposit money banks, aka commercial banks. That is what the recent announcement will affect. I know that in the coming period, central bank will even announce for finance houses, for commercial bank, for merchant banks, and so many other banks may eventually be affected. Now, for small businesses, it's important for us not to be insensitive to the kind of economy that we have. It's highly informal, driven by small businesses, according to the central bank's data. So in making policy, in looking for the capitalization, trying to grow the economy to $1 trillion, it's also very important for us to do this with some caution, bearing in mind that over 80%, and I said that with all sense of caution, in the real sense, over 90% of businesses in Nigeria are within the micro, small, and medium scale enterprise. So the banks that are servicing those people need to be, to some extent, not completely say we are going to protect or give money to them, but we need to make provision such that those who are depositing funds with them are protected, and they also have access to give more loans to smaller businesses. So when capitalization comes and it will now destroy the bank, then we should pay caution. But if you allow the banks to merge or to be stronger, then that would be a better development.
All right, thank you so much for your expertise. Paul Agbaje, Chief Economist with SPM Professionals. Thank you so much.
Thank you so very much for having me.